Released for the PlayStation 2 in Japan only in 2003, Initial D Special Stage is a console port of the arcade version, also known as Initial D Arcade Stage 2, that, just like the arcade games, with the main objective for players to race against different opponents from the iconic manga series. But unlike the arcade stage series, this version of the game adds in a special story mode that requires players to take on the role of two of the characters from the series, and requires you to replay various different events that happen throughout the manga comic book iterations, where they have to complete specific tasks, from racing head-on one-on-one against other opponents, but also to complete other objectives in order to progress through the story. The game as well is also voiced by its respective voice actors that are familiar with the iconic series also. There was also a previous Initial D game released earlier on the PS1 that utilises similar features, that also kind of tells certain aspects of the comic book series that is most notably known. I'll make sure to leave a link to another video that I have covered over my other channel for that video as well, so that you can check it out also. So the game comprises of many different modes throughout the story section, where you have various different challenges to overcome or complete, where you have to either complete in time attack modes or time trials. You have to compete in toge style events, one-on-one races. You also have different types of challenges where you have to race without spilling like a glass of water. So you have kind of like a bar on the screen, and every time you hit a corner or hit a bump in the road, the water will spill out, and if the water completely spills out of the cup as you're racing, it's pretty much game over and you have to restart the event. And you also have to complete all of these objectives alongside of other races where you have to finish in the quickest time or beat a specific time and beat other opponents in order to unlock many of the other game's vehicles and other features that you can play as later on. Each challenge presents its own hurdles to overcome, so it adds to the dynamic of the gameplay style. Some of them will begin as quite simple to navigate through, while they do become more difficult the further into the game that you get. There are many noticeable features with various aspects of this game, and it does play somewhat differently to the PlayStation 1 iteration of the game also, as the PS1 version focuses heavily dependent on drifting elements, which is the case in this game, but the handling dynamics are very different, and it genuinely is much easier to control the car in this game, especially during the early stages with many of the cars that you do race against. And on top of the story mode, you do also have access to many different modes, like you can play time trials or even just practice modes, so that you can get familiar with the features and handling of each of the cars in the game. And obviously the more you play through the campaigns, the more features you will unlock. And you can unlock many different cars from different types of manufacturers, from the likes of Honda, Mazda, Mitsubishi, Nissan, Subaru, Suzuki, Toyota, all with iconic classic JDM cars. Anything from the Toyota MR2, the AE86 Corolla, the Celica GT4, even from the Subaru Impreza STI, the Nissan 180SX, multiple different variations or generations of the Skyline from the R32, R33 and R34 variations, even with the likes of the Mitsubishi franchise with the Lancer Evolution 3, 4 and even 7. You'll know many of the classic cars when you see them. Like even when you look at even starter entries with the likes of the Mazda MX-5, even the Honda Civic Type R, the EK9 or the DC2 Honda Integra Type R and Honda S2000. So there were many iconic cars that you will be familiar with, that you will quickly want to get stuck into with playing. Even I know myself, when I'm playing a lot of these type of games, I always pick specific cars, and I generally always kind of nearly lean towards them because they're among some of my favourite cars of all time. So I always find that when I do play a lot of these games, I always tend to go for those type of cars, and I'm sure you'd be the same. Now however, with this game being only released in Japan, there are limitations in terms of the language barrier, because primarily the game initially was in the Japanese language originally, so it can be quite difficult to navigate through some of the menu options. But when you get into the meat and bones of the game, it's pretty much just like any other type of racing game. It is quite easy to pick up and play, and it won't take long for you to figure out really what to do. The gameplay is fast. It is relatively simple enough to pick up and play, especially in the beginning, although it does become more difficult with the challenges challenges as the further you progress, especially when you unlock different cars. You will have much more aggressive and difficult opponents to overcome. While it may not be considered to be among the best racers on the PS2, it does have some very quirky and unique features, and it definitely will appeal to fans of the Initial D franchise, especially with the likes of the cars and the characters that you'll be familiar with throughout the comic book series. But it is very easy to pick up and play, and you will have a blast playing it because the speed of the cars, it is fast paced, so you definitely get a good sense of speed for each car that you drive. And even in later years, now with the Japanese language, fans have gotten together and managed to create an English translation, which I will cover in a later video, so that it will actually help to overcome a lot of the language barriers and hurdles, so that people can really understand the whole story plot and even just get familiar with all of the game's aesthetics. But all in all, from my own personal experience, like, I played the original game on the PS1, and even though it's not considered to be among the best racers on that console either, but I found it to be enjoyable. It takes a bit of getting used to, like every other game out there, but generally when you get the hang of it, there is a lot of fun to be had. Yes, it is challenging, but it definitely offers a lot with the multitude of gameplay modes and with the racing style events, because the majority of the time you'll be spending racing on narrow kind of like mountain style roads, and you'll be racing in toge style events where you'll be navigating very long and sharp corners, driving at high speeds, while also utilising drift elements to manoeuvre around various cars and obstacles as you race through each of the tracks. So if that's the type of game that you're into, you'll definitely have a lot of fun here. And this game, alongside many other PS1 drift style games, when you even look at the Tokyo Extreme Racer Drift series that is also on the PS2, I have covered previous videos on them, so I'll make sure to drop links to those videos in the description also. Between them and this game, they also have helped inspire many modern iterations in games to be heavily influential and based off drift elements that you see in those modern games. And modern games today are now starting to perfect those gameplay mechanics, so it is easier to get into, but at the same time they also offer their own unique challenges. But these older games are still worthwhile having a look, in my own honest opinion. I genuinely think that it is good to go back every now and then and experience a lot of these original ideas and concepts of what would have led to the more modern era of gaming. So if it is something you're interested in, there's no harm in having a look at this game, especially if you're a fan of the Initial D series. There's no harm in having a look at it. While it may not be for everybody, it still is a genuine racer at its heart, and it will appeal to some people out there. So I personally would highly recommend that you do check it out, just for the novelty and the nostalgia alone. And I'd love to know your thoughts on Initial D Special Stage for the PS2, if you have played it yourself, and if so, what do you think of it overall? Are you a fan of the series, and are you a fan of drift racing games, both on the PlayStation 2 and even on the PS1, or even modern games? I'd love to hear whatever stories you have of these type of games, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around similar types of racing games that were also released on the PS2, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to be updated when future videos are released. And in the meantime, if you genuinely want to see other content around similar types of racing games also released on the system, you can check out this playlist here on screen to see more of those games in action. And I will see you all in the next one.